Thank you, everybody. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be invited to be in Kansas today. I was really looking forward to this conference. And while Mary did introduce me as being involved with the organic industry for a very long period of time, those of you who aren't certified organic or are not really interested in organic, I hope that as we go through the conversation early this afternoon, you'll find pieces of information that will be valuable to you as well. Because what we're really trying to talk about here is this concept of soil health, and whether you're a conventional farmer or an organic farmer, soil health should be important to you. But the fact of the matter is, agriculture is changing. And if we don't pay attention as farmers and ag professionals, we're going to be left behind. I'm going to tell you a few stories that I've collected over the last year or two as I travel around the world and around the country that I think bring that to light. But along with those changes, there's going to be challenges. It's not all easy. And we have to think about that and talk about it. First of all, I want to say that part of the problem we have when we look across the country and around the world is we have a broken food system when yield is the only metrics by which we judge our success. Yield is important, and farmers like to talk about yield, but the fact of the matter is, none of us as farmers, and while I am the executive director of the Rodale Institute, my son and I also have a farm at home. He manages that now, and he has an organic dairy that he's set up there, and we ship to Organic Valley. But we understand that yield, and we understand the basics of economics on a farm, but it's not the only measuring stick that we should use. Because when we use that as this primary measuring stick, we get ourselves in trouble with every other metrics that we should be looking at. Back in 1938, along came this guy named J.I. Rodale. He was the founder of the Rodale Institute. He was not a farmer. Anybody that knows anything about the history of the Institute, and our Institute, we manage a 333-acre research and education facility in southeastern Pennsylvania. J.I. Rodale never saw that particular farm. He passed away in 1971. But J.I. Rodale, in 1938, he came from Jewish descent. He was looking at what was happening in the landscape of Europe, and he said, you know, part of the problem with the Jewish people is we are not farmers. We don't know how to grow food. We are part of the fed society. And he said, that's good as long as people choose to feed you, but when they stop, you know, things get kind of rough. So he made a lot of money. He lived in Brooklyn, New York, and he said, I'm going to buy a farm. And he bought a farm in Pennsylvania, about 70 acres. And he didn't know anything about agriculture. He went from not even having a flower pot to having 70 acres of soil. Calls Penn State University and says, what do I do, guys? And they said, well, the first thing is you got to have all these poisons to kill the weeds, the insects, the diseases, and all that sort of stuff. And he said, well, in the whole conversation, he writes, we never talked about the soil. And he said, but I bought 70 acres of soil. I got all this ground. Shouldn't I be? They said, no, that has nothing to do with it. And so in his mind, being not an agriculturalist, not a farmer, he said, that doesn't make sense to me. I know in my factory, the quality of the products I get out the door are dependent on the quality of the materials I bring in the door. Shouldn't the farm be the same way? Shouldn't I depend on soil? And in 1942, after thinking about this for a few years, he wrote those words on a blackboard. Healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. Now, he did not use the word organic in anything he was talking about. He simply made that statement. What he was telling us as farmers is our goal, not our job, but our goal is to produce healthy people. That's our goal. Within that goal, we have lots of different objectives. Yes, we have to produce food because we have to feed people. But that's not the goal. The goal is to produce healthy people. And he said there's no way we can have people become healthy by spraying poison on the land. It's just not possible. That alchemy doesn't work. You cannot take herbicide and turn it into healthy people. Nobody says spraying herbicide makes people healthy. Spraying herbicide will kill weeds, yes, but that's not the goal. The goal is to have healthy people. So whether we're conventional or organic, if we can agree that healthy people's health is important to us as ag professionals, then it changes the way we think about the soil. Because he said if you look historically, and he was a bit of a historian, and he did a lot of reading, he said most cultures destroy themselves because they destroyed the soil that they sat on. America is no different. If we don't take care of our soil, we cannot produce healthy food and we cannot have healthy people. The other thing I want you to understand as we go through this conversation is when we're talking about organic agriculture, we're talking about modern, state-of-the-art, science-based agriculture. We are not talking about 40 acres and a mule. We're not talking about, I mean, that's okay if that's what you want to do. I'm not opposed to that. But we're talking about using modern science, state-of-the-art biology, ag engineering, seed breeding, allowed material, all those tools. We have a lot of tools that we can put to work for ourselves. What we are saying is that, for the most part, we have to change the way we manage these resources. I happened to be in California a few years ago, stood in the middle of the road and took 2 pictures. Looked east, took a picture, turned 180 degrees, took another picture. The reason I stopped there on the road, there was a sign that said organic raisin grapes. Caught my attention. The field with the green in it was the organic field. The field across the street was conventional raisin grapes. Now, could it be the same farmer? I don't know. But it's the same soil. The only thing that went through the middle of the 2 fields was a little road. Same trellis system, same crop, same access to the same labor pool. Everything's the same, except the way the farmer's choosing to use those resources. It's pretty obvious to us, which side of the road we'd like to live on. Picture yourself as a bird, a butterfly, a soil microbe, an earthworm. Which side of the road do you want to live on? Pretty easy to tell. So how are we as farmers going to use the resources we have to create that kind of environment where we can produce healthy soil? Now you will notice that I don't talk much about soil quality. Soil quality really can't change much, in my opinion. Whatever you bought, inherited, stole, however you got it, that's what you have. Quality infers a state of being that is not living or dynamic. This can be a high quality table under this tablecloth. I doubt it, but it could be. It cannot be a healthy table. It's inanimate, it's dead. When you put the word health in front of something like soil, you automatically transition your brain to start thinking about life and a dynamic state of being that we can impact as farmers, just like we do our own state of health. If you smoke and you stop smoking, theoretically, you get healthier. If you exercise, you don't wear out, you get healthier. The same thing is true with the soil. If we can think of the soil as being alive, then we can impact it in a dynamic way. Those 2 clumps of soil that are being held in the hands of Dr. Ray Weil from the University of Maryland come from our long-term farming systems trial at the Rodale Institute. And I think even in this kind of well-lit room, you can see a difference in those 2 soils in terms of color. If you were a little closer, you could see the hair roots, the difference in the way the plants react to the soil. Those soil samples were taken 10 feet apart from each other in the same field. They're the same soil quality. They are not the same soil health. We changed the health of that soil. We went from what looks like conventional soil to the organic soil, and we have side-by-side comparison plots that have been in place for 35 years now. But look what happens when you take those 2 clumps of soil and put them in water. That's huge. The reason Iowa is washing down the Mississippi River is not because we farm it, it's because of the way we farm it. We have changed the soil's ability or inability to interact with water, and the soil structurally cannot stay in place. There's nothing the farmer's doing wrong at that point. You can't stop it from happening. It's going to wash away. It's going to blow away because of the way we've interacted with it. What we want is soil that looks like this. And we can do that simply by changing the way we manage the resources that we have. Again, whether you're conventional or organic, we can make these kinds of impacts. Of course, from Rodale's perspective, as we move closer and closer to certified organic practices, the job actually gets easier because you're not fighting some of the unintended consequences of herbicides and salt-based fertilizers. And we know this works, again, because it's based on science. What we're talking about is replacing the science of chemistry and biotechnology. Legitimate sciences, we understand that, but we're replacing those with another legitimate science, biology. I was just over at K-State this morning talking to a bunch of students over there, and they actually take biology at K-State. You can do that. It's a legitimate science. The thing between those sciences that make things challenging is if you look at chemistry, chemistry is a very clean science. By that I mean, if I have 2 beakers of chemicals and I mix them together, the reaction is exactly the same today, tomorrow, here, or Brazil. That is not true with biology. Biology is a very messy science. The biology of our body changes. When you ate lunch, it changed. When you don't eat lunch, it changes. The soil is the same thing. It changes all the time. It's very dynamic. It's always in flux. That makes it very complicated. The cover crop I use in Pennsylvania is not the cover crop we're going to talk about here in Kansas. Ooh, that got messy. Roundup's the same. It's the same everywhere. It works the same, or it doesn't work. Biology is different. But look at what happens with those 2 clumps of soil. These are the plots, or similar plots that they came from. Again, you can see in this picture that the soil on the, well, if you're looking at me, it would be on your right. I'm dyslexic. If you're not looking at me, I don't know which direction it is. That light-colored soil, that's conventionally being farmed. And the darker one is organic. They were both plowed and prepped and ready to plant wheat in this particular scenario. We planted the wheat, and then it rained. We have changed the soil's ability or inability to interact with water. This is huge. One of the reasons that we've changed it is because of the life in the soil. Again, if we can think of the soil as being alive, then we have to start thinking about the complex diversity that lives under our feet. We have a soil microbiologist that works with us at Rodale, Dr. Chris Nichols. And if Dr. Nichols was here, she put these numbers in place here, and she said, on an average acre of land, we have between 5,000 and 20,000 pounds of microbial life underneath the surface of the soil. In Pennsylvania, we can produce about 1,000-pound animal unit per acre, roughly, give or take. Sometimes 3/4 of an acre, sometimes an acre and an eighth or something. But roughly 1,000 pounds of animal unit per acre above ground that we can feed. Look how much we're feeding underground. 10, 20 times that amount of life. And that's feeding and eating in terms of tonnage. There's a lot of life underneath the soil. We don't see it. Dr. Nichols said when she started her bachelor's degree in microbiology, she said we assumed we knew about this much of what's going on in the soil. By the time I got my PhD, we figured we knew this much, and now that I've had my PhD for 15 years, I don't know if I know anything. It's very, very complex and very hard to study, but that doesn't mean we should ignore it. If we agree that there's life in the soil, and I think we all agree to that, we can agree or disagree on the diversity or what makes it good or bad, we know that we have to feed that soil. We can feed it with many different tools, and we'll talk about those. One of the tools that we use on our farm is a little bit of compost. Not a lot, just a little. But we know that that microbial life has to eat. If you weren't feeding your cattle or your hogs or your chickens, the SPCA would come, and PETA would be at your door. But if you don't feed the life under the soil, nobody shows up, nobody cares. In fact, you can probably get a government subsidy to help you out. But we're talking about feeding the soil. If you're going to make compost, according to the USDA, the USDA does have standards that you have to follow. Why that's important is because if you're a vegetable crop operator in particular, and you want to use compost, you have to make it the right way, or else what you really have is raw manure. If you don't follow, there's only two things the federal government recognizes under the USDA organic standard, and that is raw manure or compost. And they have different harvest standards, which is why it's important for you to know that. The other thing we want to talk about is animals on the farm. Animals come in many, many shapes and sizes. I firmly believe animals belong on farms, not in feedlots. I was just over at K-State's research facility, drove through with Carrie this morning, and we saw some of the feedlots, and she said they've had trouble with their lagoon system over there. You put 10,000 people in that system, you're going to have trouble with the lagoon system too. I mean, it's not a natural state for animals to live in. So how do we get more animals out on the farm? We believe animals should be out grazing. And what's more important, as we look at those changes and challenges I mentioned, consumers believe that. Toyota and Honda did not get to be the largest auto manufacturers in the world by selling cars to Japanese people. They did it by paying attention to what the market was telling them. While Ford and GM were building SUVs and Hummers, they were building fuel-efficient cars. And suddenly they got wealthy. I was telling Klaas that story last night. He said, actually, Henry Ford made GM the largest auto manufacturer in the world because he refused to change the paint color from black to red. Consumers wanted red, he wanted black. That's what happens. They went somewhere else. The same thing is true with us as farmers if we don't pay attention to the market. Pennsylvania is a net importer of organic grain. We're like number 3 in the nation for certified organic operations. But we still import grain. We import grain because it's going into the poultry market. Frank Perdue did not get up one morning, drink the Kool-Aid, and want to be organic. He's looking at the market. And the market is telling him there's a transition taking place in the consumer world, and people want chickens that are outside on grass. And they want them certified organic. And they're willing to pay for that. And he wants their money. So I have a partner in Argentina that I work with. I get to go down there about once a year. And it's there's a lot of large farms that I work with. But the one farm in particular, the Rivera brothers, their operation is 34,000 certified organic acres. Most of their product comes to the United States. A good bit of it comes into Pennsylvania. So last November, I was standing there working with them. Now, they don't have a lot of government subsidy programs. They don't have anything that keeps them in business but their own wits. And so they transitioned to organic because he said, we looked at what was happening to the U.S. market and what's happening with Pennsylvania, and Purdue has buyers down there. The buyer was in the office when I was there. A couple of the other farms, he was there a week or two ahead or behind me, because I know him. And they said, you know, last year Fernando asked me, in very perfect English, he said, what's wrong with farmers in Pennsylvania? Are you stupid? We don't think we're stupid, but why do you ask? He said, well, here's the way it works. He said, in Argentina, I grow organic grain. I put it on a tractor trailer. I haul it to Buenos Aires, put it on a ship. Now, because our government's fairly corrupt, and they know that grain's worth a lot, I have to pay an export tariff to get the ship to leave port. Ship leaves the port. I pay the tariff, ship leaves the port, goes to Baltimore, Maryland. I take it off the ship, put it on a tractor trailer again, ship it into Pennsylvania. And I'm making money. You literally live in the shadow of the building I shipped to, he said, and you're too stupid to put it on a truck one time and take it there and get the full value of that grain. You must be stupid. Because he's looking at the market, and the market is telling him what to do. We don't tend to do that all the time, and we really need to start thinking about that. What's the market telling us? That life on the farm, that livestock that we have, comes in many shapes and forms. We have to think about that. The other thing we need to think about is crop rotations. I was in Canada a couple of months ago and talking with some farmers there, and the one farmer said, yeah, I really like what you're saying, Jeff. Makes sense to me. I'm interested in soil health, but all I want to grow is soybeans. Yeah, that's going to be tough. He goes, well, but I like soybeans, and I make money on soybeans, and I have a good market, and it's really easy because I only work a couple weeks in the spring and a couple weeks in the fall, and I can make a living. For now. Not forever. So we've got to talk about crop rotations. All of us in the organic world or that are interested in soil health have to balance out the diet of that microbial life in the soil, and that means different roots and different root structures. We have to think about that. In fact, way back in 1938, Charles Leidy at the USDA in the 1938 yearbook wrote, there is no other method of weed control, mechanical, chemical, biological, that is so economically and easily practiced as a well-arranged sequence of tillage and cropping. We have known for a long time that crop rotations can help us. The one farm I was at in Argentina, to tell a story on the other side of the fence, was working with some farmers there, and they were planting soybeans when I was there. And I said, okay, what's your crop rotation? That farmer did not speak English. They were farming 4,000 acres, two brothers. And he said, well, what do you mean? Soybeans. I said, well, what was here last year? And he said, soybeans. And then I said, you know, and the year before that. And you know how when people don't understand English, we talk louder and slower, like it's somehow going to help. So he starts speaking Spanish louder and slower. And it was soybeans. I'm like, okay. Well, I said, you have corn over there, and you got soybeans here. Why don't you move the corn over here and the soybeans over there? And then I do understand the gringo's an idiot in Spanish, as he said, because this is the soybean field. And it wasn't that he was stupid, because he's not. He's a bright, intelligent man. Just didn't have the tools and the knowledge coming out of the university system there to tell him what to do with crop rotations. And I said, don't you have a problem with insects? He said, of course. Dug around with his little pocket knife and he pulled up some grubs. He said, they're just waiting for me to plant the beans so they can eat them. I said, okay, what do you do for that? He said, we spray. I said, what do you spray? He said, whatever the salesman has. I said, how much do you spray? He said, until I run out of money. And then the salesman stops coming and I stop spraying and we take what we get. Where do you think those beans go? Right here. But we know that if we rotate crops, we don't have as many problems. So on one hand, we create problems and then we solve them with inputs. The other thing we need to think about is varieties that we put in our rotation. People don't think about how varieties interact, whether it's vegetable crops or in this case corn, with the environment that they live in. We did a variety trial at Rodale because we were looking at some corn seed to put into our long-term systems trial. And what we saw is that not all corn varieties interact with weed pressure the same. Some varieties are scrappy. They're looking for a fight. They want to fight for nutrients, they want to fight for water, and the harder they have to fight, the stronger they get and the more they produce. Other varieties basically shut down. It's in their genetic makeup. Same is true with people and everything else. Some people are fighters and some aren't. Why would we think it's different in corn? That one variety over there, that NC112E1, As soon as any weeds were present, this experiment was more complex than this. We shoved a lot of the air out of it to show the data. Whenever weeds were present, 61% of the yield potential was lost as soon as weeds were there. 68F32, no matter how hard you packed weeds into that system, and we planted weeds, no matter how hard you packed weeds in that system, the most you could make it lose was 9%. In fact, if you look in year 2004, when weeds weren't present, it got pissed off, and it actually made more when the weeds were there. It was looking for a fight. Which variety do you think we planted in our farming systems trial? 68F32. But if you call a seed company, and again, I don't care whether it's vegetable seeds or grain crops, and you ask them how their crops perform in the presence of weeds, they're going to go, huh? Because they don't look at it under those scenarios. But that's how we farm. Why don't we look at these things? So as farmers, you really need to do some research on your own farms. Look at these varieties. Get a small sample of some different varieties and look at them throughout the year and how they perform. You might see that you could boost your yield by 60% just by checking a different box on the chart. Because these seeds all have the same yield potential. They're all the same number of days to maturity. 0 is where we hand weeded, so we know that we know what the potential is of these crops. What I really want to talk about this afternoon is cover crops. Because no matter what kind of system you have, adding cover crops to the system will make it look like magic. There's no easier way to improve the health of your soil than using cover crops. Flying in from Pennsylvania yesterday, I noticed that except for golf courses, almost everything is brown. Golf courses look like little emeralds from 10,000 feet. You just see them glowing down there. Everything else is brown. That's a crime. Basically, what we're eating when we eat the food today is we're eating sunshine. Sunshine hits the plants turn it into food, whether you eat it through beef, pork, chicken, or lettuce. It's the sunshine that we're eating, the energy from the sun. If there's no plant there, there's no photosynthesis, there is no energy being captured. It's just being radiated back into the air. All that microbial life that we talked about down there begins to die. There's no roots for it to feed onto. It can't get energy from the sun. Those microbes don't like to lay up in the sun and bake. They die. They need to get their energy from a plant. And when we're talking about cover crops, we're talking about thick, dense stands of cover crops. On our farm, whether it's at home or at Rodale, cover crops is the #1 crop we farm. Again, think about it. Our goal is to produce healthy people. If I do everything right with cover crops, it's impossible not to grow cash crops. It's just so easy to grow them. If you focus on the cash crops, then that's where your energy is and you have to work on it. If you focus on cover crops, which are actually easier to grow, then they grow the cash crop for you. Anybody here fly an airplane? Yeah, a couple of people. I've only ever flown myself a few times, taking lessons. When you go down the runway, it's impossible not to take off. You get up to speed, that thing just lifts off the ground and goes. Landing's a whole other story, which I found out. But they don't look quite so pretty when they're laying on their lid, upside down, but that's another story. But it's really easy to take off. The same thing is true with cover crops. If you get the cover crop right, the cash crop is just going to grow. It takes off and flies. If you get the cover crop wrong, then you're fighting. There's so many things that cover crops can do for us. Picture yourself as an earthworm or a soil microbe under the surface of the soil on bare ground. These temperatures were taken at the same time, one under a cover crop and one on bare soil right at corn planting. The soil underneath the surface was 107 degrees wherever this photograph was taken. That's death to microbes. They start to die. You don't want to lay down on a piece of ground at 107 degrees and lay there in the sun. Under the cover crop, 87 degrees. Huge difference just by having cover crops there. Now, if cover crops are important, then we really have to think about what we're doing with these things. Every time I see cover crops not work on a farm, there's usually 2 reasons. One is they got planted way too late, way out of timing. If you planted your corn 3 or 4 months late, you wouldn't expect to get a good crop. Or milo or radishes, I don't care what you're planting. But farmers will inevitably call me, my phone will start ringing soon when I get back, from farmers saying, hey, I didn't get my cover crop in the ground, is it too late? I'm in Minnesota. Well, I don't know. You tell me. You're calling and asking because you know it's too late. These pictures were all taken on April 1st. This is some work that Stephen Mirsky did at USDA Research Station in Beltsville. in conjunction with Penn State, with Dave Mortensen and Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's at Cornell now. But you can see cover crops that were planted in August. It's the same species, same variety, planted at the same rate, just different times of the year. So here you come in April 1st. Which cover crop is going to be doing the job for you? Not the one planted in October. And if you had one planted in December, it would look even worse. So farmers don't plant cover crops on time because they say it was just a cover crop. The other thing they do is they plant at half the seeding rate. Because they say, have you priced out cover crop seed lately? Boy, that stuff's expensive. I cut the rate in half, no big deal. You can't expect to get all the benefits you want out of cover crops if you plant them at half the rate and 4 months late. It's not going to work. So if you agree that cover crops are important, then you should be looking for opportunities on your farm to fill in windows with cover crops. Our soil on our farm is never bare. We got a little window of opportunity in our veg fields in the spring or in the summer. We harvested wheat. We're not ready to plant a cover crop. We stick buckwheat in. 6 weeks later, buckwheat's blooming. We're trying to make our ground and our soil exercise and work. I had an Amish friend we were trying to convince, well, I wasn't trying to convince him, but one of my partners was at Rodale, to compost his manure. No, he kept saying, I can't do it. No, I can't do it. Finally, he said, why can't you compost your manure instead of daily spreading? He said, well, I could, but I farm with horses. He said, the only work I have in the winter for the horses is spreading manure. If the horse stands in the barn all winter and does nothing, when spring comes, it's fat and lazy and it won't work. It can't work. I got to exercise that horse. Well, we have to exercise our soil. If you were an Olympic athlete, I'm kind of checking out. I'm not seeing it, but maybe. If you were an Olympic athlete and you laid on the couch from now till next summer and then woke up and said, well, I'm ready to perform, you would not perform at peak capacity. But that's what we're asking our soil to do. We're taking the best soil that the world has seen, some of it here in Kansas, and we let it lay brown all winter. And then in spring we say, get up and grow, and it can't. And we go, see, it needs inputs. Well, of course it does, because we created that model. There's so many things that are science-based that we don't know and understand. This information came, I just found it, somebody emailed it to me, from Tel Aviv University in Israel, not that it matters where it came from. Thinking about mycorrhizal fungi, a lot of us as farmers have heard about this, the conversations about mycorrhizal fungi and the power of that. What this university found was that mycorrhizal fungi is actually a highway system for bacteria under the surface of the soil. Millions of miles of bacteria, millions, within an acre. And it's all a highway system for bacteria to move along those strands. How cool and exciting is that? Happening under our feet. So much magic that we don't know anything about. Just to show you how some of this works in different areas of the country, this is some work that I've been doing with Dr. David Wright at the University of Florida. This is not organic work, this is conventional work. What David Wright did was he looked at a 200-acre production system. David's a great guy, a real family man. He has 10 children. Him and his wife homeschooled them all. He wants them to get into agriculture. He said a 200-acre cotton and peanut farm, typically in the panhandle of Florida, he averaged the income over 10 years, it was $5,000 a year on 200 acres. That was the profit. He said, how are we going to get young people out of K-State, the brightest and the best, to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in a production system where they might make $5,000 profit on average? You're not. You're not going to do it. So he said, okay, conventional wisdom would say, if that's the case, on 200 acres you make 5,000, if you want 10,000, get 400 acres. That would make sense. That's what the economists would tell him. He said, that much land is not available. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to farm half as much. Counterintuitive. Different kind of thinking. He said, instead of having this cotton peanut rotation, which oats is really an outlier because most farmers don't do that, the ground's brown. So cotton peanuts, 5,000. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take half the land out of production, and I'm going to put it in Bahia grass. I'm still going to keep cotton and peanuts in the rotation. But now I'm only farming half as much. But he said, I can bale this Bahia grass, and I can graze it. And what he noticed was, this is the 200-acre plot owned by University of Florida that he's working on. What he noticed was that, when he started to include Bahia grass in his rotation, he changed the soil's ability to interact with water. This is an irrigation chart. It's hard to see, but this is the conventional system, irrigated and non-irrigated. He needed 4 times as much water to grow the same amount of crop when he did not have a cover crop. That cover crop changed the soil's ability to interact with water. Again, this isn't organic, this is conventional. He said, so I use less water. Well, we got to pay for water. So he made more money because he saved on water. He also, coming out of the hair grass, doubled the yield of peanuts. Double. So he said, I had the same amount of peanuts on half the amount of land. That freed up half his land to build soil health. And he said, I also sold hay, and I sold grazing rights. He went from $5,000 on that 200 acres to $40,000. The exact same resource. No extra land, no extra anything, just changed the way he was using the resource. Now, he said, at $40,000, I can get somebody interested to come out of the university and get started in agriculture. That's not a ton of money, I understand, but it's enough to get a young person started. Can we do that? Of course we can. And he doubled the yield of cotton coming out of that peanuts, because the peanuts put a lot of nitrogen in the ground, it's a legume, and he said, I doubled the yield of cotton. So I had the same amount of cotton, same amount of peanuts, plus half my land to build soil health, sold the hay grass, sold grazing rights, and made more money. Now he said, what if we did that as an organic system? That's what we're trying to get funding for right now. Coca-Cola funded that project for him. There's people interested in funding this kind of work. So he said, what if we had the same thing in organic, where we could up the ante and really build that health of the soil, focus in on that, improve that, and get a premium for our cotton and peanuts? Could we go to $80,000? Well, if you can make $80,000 on 200 acres, not bad money. You certainly could get people involved then. Okay, so now we got this soil health thing figured out. We got all the microbes kicking around down there doing their thing, and we've got cover crops all over the place. Now as organic farmers, here we come, and we do some tillage. Or if you're a conventional farmer, you're going to come in and spray Roundup. The problem I have with spraying Roundup is there's some unintended consequences there. Roundup kills mycorrhizal fungi. That's not its intended purpose. That's not why we spray it. That's not why it was designed or invented for. It was designed to kill weeds and be an antibiotic. That's what it's designed for. But it happens to kill mycorrhizal fungi. If I call Penn State, which I do from time to time, I'll call them and I'll say, okay, in our research plots that we have to spray, when should I spray my cover crop? They said the earliest in spring you can possibly spray it. Spray it early, because that's when it's easiest to kill. Once hairy vetch gets thick and rank and is 3 foot tall, you can spray the crap out of it. It doesn't want to die. So they kill it when it's young. Cover crops on our farm are our best employee. It's like going into the factory, say, who's the best employee? Well, it's Jane. Well, shoot her. Why would you kill your best employee? My cover crop is at home today, working for me. It works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year while it's in the ground. It's working. Why would I kill it early when it's fixing nitrogen and doing what I want? So here we come along with tillage, and in organic systems we till the soil, and we do some tillage, and we do too much, and I recognize that. When we till the soil, we open it up to this kind of activity, erosion. The other thing we do is we sentence ourselves to some secondary tillages. I don't know if Klaas talked about cultivation at all. I know it's one of your topics. Really? This is like his favorite topic. He's a cultivator extraordinaire. But we sentence ourselves to multiple tillages. So here we have all this life in the soil that we've tried to create, and we have all this earthworm population, and then we do this. Picture yourself as an earthworm. That is not a good day. That is not a good day. So we want to minimize that on organic farms. So how do we do that? Well, years and years and years ago, because I am getting old, I was looking at systems that we know work. How many people have gardens on their farm or their backyard? Everybody. How many people put mulch on the garden? Everybody. Why do you do it? Exercise? No, you do it to stop annual weeds from expressing themselves. So we've already all agreed that mulch will stop annual weeds from expressing themselves. We just agreed to that. Okay, if I told you to go out and mulch Kansas, you would think I was an idiot. Maybe you'd still keep chuckling, but you'd probably get up and walk out, rightfully so. But what if we grow the mulch right in the field? We already talked about the fact that we want cover crops. We want them to last a long time because they're working for us, and I don't want to spray them. So whether you're conventional or organic, what if we just knock them down and kill them in place? This happens to be some work that Dr. Jeff Mitchell is doing with me at UC Davis. They can grow serious amounts of rye out there. That's a beautiful field of rye. So what we did was, I invented this roller crimper. I got put it on the front of the tractor, and I put the planter on the back of the tractor. Now it is a one-pass operation. No herbicide, no tillage. The life under the soil doesn't even hardly know you drove over it, because you're driving on this wall-to-wall carpet of beautiful green material. And again, because organic agriculture is modern, based on modern Ag engineering, we can take advantage of modern planter technology. Even though my friend in Argentina thinks we're stupid, we're not. You know, we just have different barriers to our adoption. But we can use modern planter technology, and we can stick seeds in the ground, no-till, even if we're organic farmers or conventional farmers. The challenge is to build these tools to think about what our goal is. If our goal is to kill these cover crops in place, then let's think about that. How are we going to do it without herbicide? So I built this roller crimper. The one that I built is a 10-footer. The one that Howard Buffett uses is 60-foot. And he's got two of them, so he takes 120 feet at a time down the field, and he rolls cover crops and plants into it. Howard Buffett is not organic. Howard Buffett has traveled around the world enough to understand that the health of the soil is being depleted, and we have to change that if we expect civilization to last. We have to make that improvement and change, and we have to start now. So he said, look, if I can roll cover crops and plant GMO soybeans, and I don't have to spray Roundup, that is money in my pocket. I'm improving the health of the soil, protecting it, capturing energy from the sun, sequestering carbon, and saving money at the same time. The measuring stick isn't on the yield. It's all these other things that we need to think about. Here's an example of how this works in an organic farm. The field on your left, with a long list of field activities, was an alfalfa field. These were not research plots. This just happened to be two production fields next to each other at the Rodale Institute. The field on the right, where the corn looks a little bit more robust, was a hairy vetch field. That's a winter annual. Because alfalfa is a perennial crop, I cannot kill it with a roller crimper. This isn't magic, it's just biology and mechanics. So I had to plow it, because I can't spray it. So I moldboard plowed it, I disked it, I packed it, I planted it, I rotary hoed it twice, cultivated it twice, harvested it once. I got 143 bushels, you probably can't read that, a respectable number for our shaly eastern soils. But I went over the field 9 times. The other field, because it was a hairy vetch cover crop, I had the roller on the front of the tractor, the planter on the back of the tractor, one pass over the field, no fertilizer, because the legumes supplied all the nitrogen, no herbicide, because I didn't need it, no tillage, because I didn't need it. I harvested it, and I got 160 bushel of corn. I showed this same image to a group of economists at Penn State University once. It was a smaller group, and somebody yelled from the back of the room, "Yeah, but can you prove you saved money?" I said, no, it wasn't a research project, but you know, every farmer in this room can see that if you don't have to go over the field, those 7 extra trips, you're saving money. Or you're saving time, at least maybe you can have a picnic with your family or something, I don't know what. But this is what it looks like from the hood of the tractor. We're planting corn. That's a cornfield. And again, I don't care whether you're organic or conventional, that's a cornfield. You can see the planter going through there. We can stick seed in the ground and get corn coming up. There's a cornfield. I tell you, that's beautiful. You see acres of that stuff, it just warms your heart to see that. With no, first time I did this in a production field, one of my neighbors stopped by and he said, "Hey, I thought you guys were organic." I said, "We are." He goes, "You sprayed that." I said, "No, we didn't." He stopped every day to look at that field and said, "That is just amazing. This cardboard mulch suppressing the weeds." And this field, this picture was taken in 2000 and I'm going to say 11 or 12. That field's been organic since 1971. I guarantee you there's weed pressure there. And what's really more important is when we look at the statistics and the data on this, and these numbers were calculated, we don't have our own economists. This was done with Mississippi State. You can see down here, we work with them and their Mississippi State budget generator and their research team, looking at numbers that we collect out of our long-term farming systems trial, where we can compare organic tilled soils, organic no-till soils, conventional tilled soils using a chisel plow, and conventional no-till. Let's look at conventional tilled soil. If we had 100 bushel yield of corn, which we don't, but if you had 100 bushel just for round numbers, for every acre that you farmed, not including land cost, you lost $16 an acre. And then people say, "Oh, but I'm no-till." You go, "Okay, then you lost $85 an acre." It doesn't mean you didn't produce more corn, it means somebody else took your money for the input costs. At the same time, in these organic systems, we made over $500 an acre. Now, we average the same yield whether we're conventional or organic, and we're closer to the 150 bushel mark. And so are most of our neighbors. So our neighbors say, "Yeah, but I'm over here, I actually made $122 an acre." I'm like, "Yeah, I made $900. And these are on old numbers. If you can't read these numbers, I understand that. These numbers were from 2008 through 2010. And at that time, the average corn price was $4.15, and organic corn was $8.36. I can tell you right now, organic corn, the last time I checked, was $12.90. I don't know what it is exactly, but around $12.90. And conventional corn, I looked in the feed mill yesterday before I left to come to work, it was 360. So conventional corn has gone down, organic corn has gone up. These numbers would be skewed even further. It's ridiculous that if you can't make money growing organic corn, there's a problem. A serious problem with your farming operation. I was talking with a farmer a couple of months ago. He said, I got 200 bushel of corn. I said, good for you. I said, what did it cost you? He said, about 170 bushels. I said, so you grew 30 bushel corn. He said, no, I grew 200 bushel corn. No, I said, you grew 30 bushel corn. I grew 30 bushel corn on my lawn outside. 30 bushel corn is nothing. Then he launched into the argument. He said, yeah, but I'm trying to feed the world. And I said, well, it's not working. When you think about these cover crops, the one thing you have to think about is, anybody who's mulched their garden, you know if the kids go out and do it, and they put it on real nice and loose and light, it looks good for about 2 days, then the weeds come through it. If you go out there and put it on 8 inches thick, now you got something. So we need biomass. What that's telling us is we need enough biomass to last the season, to suppress the weeds, which means we used to say 5,000, we're really pushing it up closer to 8,000 pounds of biomass to suppress the weeds throughout the season, no matter what crop you're growing. And we can do that. There's plenty of crops that can do that. We're actually getting much better at growing cover crops. We're up around the 11,000, 12,000 pound range now. 6 tons of biomass we can put on the field. I'll tell you what, when you call John Deere because you're having trouble getting the planter in the ground, and now with modern technology, you know, we can take a cell phone and shoot a little video of it and zap it to them so they can, you're talking on the phone and they can see the video while you're doing it. And they go, oh my God, you want us to plant through that? It's like, yeah, and they say, we can do it. That's what ag engineers love to do. They get up every morning thinking about how to solve those kinds of problems. Let's give them those challenges. The other thing to think about is not all cover crops are created equal. This is some rye work that was being done by Dr. Chris Reber-Horton at North Carolina State, and he was looking at the amount of rye, the different rye varieties and the amount of biomass they can produce. So when people say plant rye, you really should say what to plant. And what you plant in Kansas is going to be different than what he plants in North Carolina, because in North Carolina, a bruisey rye works the best. In Pennsylvania, it's a Rostock rye. We'll be up here, and this will be down here. What are you going to do in Kansas? I don't know. You're going to have to figure that out, or somebody will. The one thing I do know is if you don't adjust the planter and you don't get seed in the ground, it's not going to grow. So you got to change your planter. You got to think about that. But there are tools out there that help us do that. This is a tool that we mounted to our planter now. It's called a residue slicer, made by an Amish guy in Pennsylvania. Looking at our system, he came out and looked at it and he said, oh, well, I know what the problem is. When you go to cut through this heavy residue, if your coulters aren't sharp and you don't have enough weight on the planter, anybody ever cut a pizza and you kind of roll over it real nice and light? Might get the cheese, but not the crust. You know, you got to cut through that whole thing. So the planter, he says, rolling along, and it's just taking that cover crop and stuffing it in the ground. Then you put your seed on top of it, and nothing germinates and grows. You got to cut it. So he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this little tool here that mounts on any kind of planter. We have ours on a monosem planter. He designed it for John Deere. It's got 2 wheels. The wheels pin the cover crop to the ground. The slicer cuts through it. Now you cut right through that mulch. The planter slices right through it like butter. USDA is using this. Most of the research farms are now using this system. That's just ag engineering. We just have to ask the right questions to solve the problem. So here's our little planter that we're using for our research plots. You know, this is the only part in the back that's the planter. Everything else is just stuff that we use to get through that mulch and get our seed in the ground. But we can do it. Dr. Gladys Zanatti on our team holding up some of that residue at harvest time. That was 150 bushel corn in that field. My neighbor harvested it, and that's what his yield monitor said on the combine. It was just some production ground that we were using for some dairy feed. But you know, at the end of the season, we still have that mulch in the ground doing its work. Now, there's some challenges to this system. There's a lot we don't know. I mean, I've been working on this. Some other people have been working on it a little bit, but there's a lot of unanswered questions. Here's one thing that farmer said to us. Farmers will look at this. You just see a little bit of this rye standing up in the corner over here. They said, boy, I'd like to harvest that rye. There's a crop I could harvest. And you can do that. So we took off the crop, and they said, boy, it's nice and clean, organic field. I'm going to plant soybeans in there. Planted the soybeans, here come the weeds. How the combine found 17 bushel per acre in that mess is beyond me, but it did. But here's a cover crop that we rolled. And here's what I want you to pay attention to, because here's something we don't understand. This was planted on June 1st. Here's that thick mass of biomass. That's probably 11,000 pounds of dry matter. We rolled it down. Here's the beans. They look nice. Got some foxtail coming up in there. Got 38 bushel. Our yield goal is 40, so we were close. That was on June 1st. We planted the same exact planter setup 1 week earlier and had 59 bushels. What happened in that 1 week that reduced my yield and increased? There's 0 weeds in here, 0. Same thing happened at Beltsville Research Station in Maryland and at NC State. What happened in that week that changed that? I don't know. I don't understand. We're looking at the data trying to figure out, was it a rain event? Was it temperature? What really went wrong? Because the difference between 38 and 59 bushel at $24 a bushel is a lot of money. You figure 1,000 acres of that. We have farmers that are doing this by the thousands of acres. That's a lot of money. What happened? How do we need the answers to these questions if we want farmers to adopt this technology. Show you a couple examples of some other farmers that are using these systems. This is Jim Miller up in Wisconsin. He's planting soybeans. Here's what Jim Miller, working with Dr. Aaron Silva. I'm not sure what it is. Oh, there we go. These are research plots on his farm, on-farm research. These are plowed and 30-inch row beans cultivated. No-till, 30-inch rows cultivated. That's the way I hopped across the field, just random strips. And he said, when he took this picture, he said, boy, I did a pretty good job cultivating. Those beans look nice and clean. And they do. Over here you see a little bit of like rye trying to stand back up, and that concerned him. Here he is standing in the field at harvest time. I don't know if you can tell from the picture, but all the cultivated beans are filled with foxtail. He got 24 bushels the acre over here. Over here where he did no-till, and he used the cover crop to suppress the weeds, no weeds, 32 bushel. More yield, less weeds, less work. It wasn't that less work was being done, it's just that he wasn't doing it. The biology of the system was doing it, and the biology of the system is better than he was at managing the weeds on that system and that farm. This is Fernando Rivera in Argentina. You know, I asked them to try a little plot there, so they tried 400 acres. I mean, like, they have 34,000, so he said, let's just try 400 acres over here, see how it works. What was really interesting is, when this field that we were standing on, you can't see the neighboring fields, but they had a 7-inch rainfall the day before I got there. We brought boots, because the folks I was with said, I know you're going to want to walk out in the field and out in the soil. You could have floated a boat on the neighbors' fields. I mean, everything was underwater. They said they won't be planting for weeks. We planted that day. He said, where did all the water go? So we got a shovel, and we dug down 2 feet, and there was moisture 2 feet down in the ground. He got every drop of that rain. Now, he had to change his planter, because I told him, your planter setup is not going to plant in this field. He said, we're going to try it. He said, you were right. You couldn't get the seed in the ground. They had to go back to the shop, change the planter around, but they had a beautiful soybean crop in that field. This is Mark Dudlaw's farm up in Wisconsin. Mark Dudlaw was looking at what we were doing. Again, you know, decent-sized farm. I think he's farming 1,500, 1,800 acres, something like that. Transitioned his farm to organic because his father died of cancer. His wife said, that's your future if you don't change something. He believed her, and so he's changing. I put this slide in here because I like Mark's saying. He says, weed control, get it right in the fall. If you get your cover crop right in the fall, the weed management in spring is ridiculously easy. If you get it wrong in the fall, you're going to be fighting it all year long. So there's his rye cover crop, and he's out there rolling and planting. He has a different type of roller. He doesn't like it. He has to roll his twice, but that's him planting. There's his soybean crop. He did 640 acres the first year, averaged 42 bushels the acre across that 640 acres. He said there were no weeds. No weeds. He said it was cleaner than the Roundup fields next to him. We can do this if we decide we want to work on it. This is the kind of work that Howard Buffett is doing. Same kind of thing. That's Howard Buffett's roller at the shop where it was being made. It's kind of funny because you can see that the guy who makes these rollers, ING Manufacturing, paints everything red. Howard Buffett said, I don't pull red paint. And so this Jake Blank, Amish guy, calls John Deere and says, I want to buy a John Deere planter frame. John Deere said, we don't sell planter frames, we sell planters. He said, but I don't want the planter, I just want a frame. He said, you're out of luck. So he called Howard Buffett and said, they won't sell me a frame. Howard said, stick by the phone. About 5 minutes later, he called and said, the frame's on its way. If you have enough money, you can get what you want. So that's a John Deere planter frame with a roller fixed to it. He mounts that on his planter, and the whole thing folds up like an octopus, just like a planter does, and away he goes. Why not? Just because you're using this kind of technology, it does not preclude you from using other technologies. You can still spray if you want to spray. You can spray Roundup. In this case, they were spraying clove oil. It was an organic plot. There's no weeds there anyway. If you have soybeans that big, weed-free, In an organic system or a conventional system, without herbicides and without tillage, you are going to make money. Those beans are going to grow once they get that big and there's no weeds. If weeds did come along, it's not going to be yield limiting. We do have some technologies for rescuing a crop, and this year we had a couple of research plots that we had to go in and rescue with a high residue cultivator. There are tools out there that will help us go through this and manage these systems. In this particular case, it was a research plot. It wasn't weedy, but we had to go through and do it anyway. That's just the nature of research sometimes. But there we went through and we cleaned up those beans. They really weren't bad, if you can sort of see over here, but we cleaned them up. There are some other systems that we can use that aren't related necessarily directly to cover crops. These are using two cash crops at the same place at the same time as cover crops. This is a wheat field. Think about, for us in Pennsylvania, we plant wheat in October. We harvest it right after the 4th of July. I don't know what you do in Kansas, but that's what we do. So in spring, this is around the first week of May, the wheat looks like a grass field. It is a grass field. You can drive on it, walk on it, spray your liquid nitrogen, do whatever you do to it. It's going to stand back up and grow just fine. But we decided to plant soybeans into it. Because what's going to happen is, as the soybeans start to grow, the wheat is starting to die. The wheat is keeping the field clean, so even in an organic field, which this was, we have very few weeds in small grains, winter grains. So now we got wheat and soybeans in the same place at the same time. This is a very moisture-limiting system, so it doesn't work everywhere, but if you have a wet spring, this system works beautifully. Now here we are combining the wheat, we clip it high, everything you see that's green there is soybeans. 54 bushel wheat, 40 bushel beans. No tillage for those crops, except we did some tillage to get the wheat in the year before. No herbicide. All we got to do is plant it and harvest it. Plant it and harvest it. It cannot get any easier than that, unless you have somebody else do it for you. I'm going to finish my talk. I started with a quote from J.I. Rodale about healthy soil. Anybody who's ever read Wendell Berry knows that he's a very philosophical person. And I think Wendell hit it right there. Soil is the great connector of our lives. It is our link to the health of the sun, the energy of the sun. It's our link to the animals we farm and consume. It's our link to the food we eat. Without the soil, we do not exist as people. We do not exist. We have to start thinking about the health of the soil, how we're going to manage that. Again, we have to learn from each other, whether we're conventional or organic. Let's work together. Let's learn together. Let's bring these processes to the table so we can discuss them, have an open dialogue, so we can improve the health of our soil, and ultimately produce healthy people. If you want to get in touch with me, email's the best, but you can call me, give it a try. If I can help you in any way I can, I would be more than pleased to do it.